Okay guys, what we're looking at here is the old crankshaft off of my 2007 Subaru Impreza 2.5i, and if I can get this to focus, you'll be able to see that there is some pretty good scoring right in here. This is where the rod bearing goes for cylinder number 1. This is 2, 3, and 4. And cylinder number 1's rod bearing died. And subsequently kind of smashed out from underneath the rod and scored this up pretty good. And while this doesn't look too bad, I did have my machine shop go ahead and check this out, do a magnetic particle inspection, and what they found is that the crank actually has a crack in it, which is microscopic and you can't see it with the naked eye, but it is definitely there, and they recommended that I definitely purchase a new crankshaft. So we're going to take a look at that here in just a moment. And once again, we're looking at the front. This is where your crank bolt would be, and your main timing sprocket. Here you have cylinder number 1's rod, where your rod bearing would go, 2, 3, and 4. So that would be 1, 2, 3, 4. Unless I've got that backwards in my mind. And then of course these are your main bearing journals. And in this particular car, on a 2007 Impreza, you've got 5 of these, and the thrust bearing, the big one, goes on the back closest to where your rear main seal would go. And that's what you'll see if you're looking for your parts, and you'll be like, well, is it the thrust bearing in the number 2 or the 3? I forget what the other one is, but this is the thrust bearing in the 5th position. Let's take a look at the new one. Alright, so here we have the brand new crankshaft. This is a superseded part. It's a little bit different. Externally it's the same dimensions, but it is a induction hardened crankshaft. I forget what the old one is, but this is how it's going to come shipped to you. I bought this on Amazon from Subaru Parts Direct, and it was about $30 or so cheaper than I could have got from the Subaru department, the parts department. And you can just see this thing is gorgeous. It is shiny, and though the box looks a little bit worse for wear, it looks like it got here okay. And just so you're aware, it also came with bubble wrap, wrapping the whole crankshaft up. It's sealed inside of kind of a wax paper with oil covering it. You can see from the old one that just having it sit out kind of at the machine shop, it's kind of gotten rusty. You can see where dude put his hands, and kind of got some good rust marks there. But so we're going to try not to leave it sit out for a few weeks and get rusty like that. I also bought the new head bolts from them as well, but I just wanted to show you guys this thing is packaged pretty well, and it's got some nice good foam pieces in it. So here on the right we have the old crankshaft, and here is the new superseded crankshaft. It is Subaru part number 12200 Alpha 330. It is a superseded part. And what you're looking at is a brand spanking new, beautiful, induction hardened, nice and machined, no messed up bearing surfaces. You got some coloration where you can see where they induction hardened. That's a pretty cool process. If you've ever seen induction hardening, they basically push the device, or push the part that they're hardening through a set of coils which have eddy currents going through it, and it heats up the part. So they do it in such a way that it gets the right hardness that they need for the job. And everything's cut and looking beautiful. So we're gonna try and get this thing spec'd up, make sure that our brand new bearings are gonna have the right oil clearances. And just for fun, we got a quick side-by-side here. You can see that the old part is a little bit scalier looking, kind of nasty, rough around the edges. It's like a cast iron or cast steel on these lobes here, and it's a lot smoother on this. You can definitely tell that the hardening is not present on the original model. Everything overall just looks a little bit nicer. Alright, so here we have cylinder number 1, 2, 3, and 4's. Well, I'm sorry, not cylinder number 1, 2, 3, and 4, but their connecting rods. And this is the order that they're going in. You can see that they've got a little bit of a Subaru logo right there, and that denotes that they're going to be facing forward. This, you want to take note that the lettering is on the same side. You don't get those swapped around. Here we have the new bearings. We got D&J bearings. Not too impressed with how these were packaged. Got them from Amazon as well. They're a standard fit bearing. Got a brand new crank. We're still going to plastigauge everything and make sure the oil clearances are good. But this is how they're packaged, and it was just kind of floating around in the box, and you could see they could kind of like squish together and maybe deform. For something that's this imperative to getting right, you would think that you know, they wouldn't package them like that, but that is what it is. Alright, what we've got here is rod number 1. I've got it taken apart. We're going to make sure that we keep everything clean, we maintain cleanliness, and when we get everything lined back up, everything's got to be in the proper orientation. We need the letters to be on the same side as the letters over here. And we're going to fit us some brand new bearings in there, like so. Now, when you are trying to find out what your oil clearance is, you need to do yourself a favor and get the factory service manual for your vehicle, because it tells you right here that it is 0.016 millimeters to 0.044 millimeters of oil clearance is normal, with a maximum limit of 0.05 millimeters. And that's going to be absolutely necessary for us when we go ahead and get these bearings installed and put them on the bearing journals here and torque them down to spec with a little bit of plastigauge, and then we're going to compare it up versus this scale. So this is what your plastigauge looks like on the inside of the package. There's your scale on the outside, and it looks almost like dental floss. It's kind of this thin plastic strip, and basically it's going to get crushed in between the mating surface of the bearing and the crankshaft. Now when you look at this, you might say, well, why is 0.025 millimeters a bigger square than 0.038 and still bigger than the 0.051? That's actually just slightly larger than the spec, the maximum spec that I'm looking for when I do this. So when I go ahead and take this back apart after plastigauging it, if I see that that little piece of green plastic has been smashed to about that 0.051 mark, I know that that clearance is basically on its limit. Now, what you're looking at here is what I was getting at was, you're looking at the it would seem counterintuitive that the smaller measurement, the smaller clearance, has the bigger bar next to it, and as we get progressively larger, the bar is smaller. But that's because, remember, we're crushing a piece of plastic in between these bearing surfaces, so the tighter it crushes it, the flatter it's going to be. The flatter it is, the less clearance there is. So the gauge kind of works backwards, so if that confuses anybody trying to do this, don't let that get to you. Alright guys, and now in order to get the plastigauge to be crushed in between this surface and this surface in the right amount, we have to make sure that we get the proper torque here. So you got to go over to your little confuser, and you'll see that the tightening torque is listed right there, and this you know, you got parentheses and all kinds of stuff, but you know, if you've taken algebra or you can read technical writings, you pretty much get this. You're looking at Newton meters is the 45, so you're looking at 45 Newton meters, and it's like, well, T, how do I know they're talking about the torque of what I'm looking for? Well, torque is up here, and you can see that right there, T for torque, pointing right at the nut that goes on the connecting rod. But we've got the torque wrench here cranked down to 33, and as best I can imagine, 0.2 foot-pounds. And we've torqued these babies down. And now we're going to go ahead and undo them and see what that plastigauge did. Okay, you can see that smudge there. If I compare this, and I'm trying to do this to the camera so it's a little bit weird, but you can see that it's not wider than the .038, but it's larger than the .051, which is a good thing, because .051, if it were that small, I mean, there's not enough oil clearance. It's not smashing down big enough. So we've got plenty of oil clearance here. I mean, it's getting close to that .025 even. So we got good oil clearance. So I'm happy with that. And if we just want to go ahead and look at what's on the bearing there, we can do that too. And comparing it, we see that we get a very similar result. It's larger than that, which means the clearance is smaller than that, and it's smaller than the white, which means the bearing clearance is good too. So we're in between that. We're in the spec, so we're looking good for there. Alright guys, so right now what you can see is I've actually went ahead and assembled with some assembly lube rod connector, or connecting rod number 1. It's torqued down to the specified 33.2-ish foot-pounds. Keep in mind these guys want a little bit of oil on the threads when you tighten them down. This piece is getting a little bit of plastigauge right now, so I'm about to undo these bolts and go from there. Alright guys and ladies, you can see we got another nice little green smudge there, and let's compare that with our plastigauge. Alright, so even this big thick one would be acceptable. We're in the middle between these, and this is the threshold for not being acceptable if it doesn't squish down that far. So as you can see, we're still looking good. So I'm going to go ahead and clean this up. Get a little bit of brake clean on there, and reassemble, and go ahead and start plastigaging the next one. Alright, at this point we're probably going to want a little bit of hands-on. So here's my bearing. It's going right in here. You can see that there is a notch at the top there, and it goes right into the notch here. So just gingerly show you that, and then you just kind of push it in place. Make sure that it's even on both sides. Push down. And it goes right down in the cap. And we've got ourselves yet another piece of plastigauge right there. And I'm just going to gently get this close. Alright, now that I've kind of got that balance with that rod sticking up from the bottom, I'm going to go ahead and put the top piece on, the rod cap as it were. Ooh, you don't want to do that too many times. Alright, so definitely be careful. Alright, so I see that I've got my lettering on this side, and the lettering is on. Don't do that. Alright, so piece of plastigauge. Got the lettering on that side of the rod, and then I've got the lettering on the opposite side of this cap. So I'm going to pick this up and proceed to put that on. And down. And they take a little bit of wiggling. And then I'm just going to go ahead and start screwing it on. Now at this point I don't want to smear the plastigauge, so I want to keep the rod stable, keep the crankshaft stable. So I'm going to put the camera down and go ahead and screw these down. Another thing is we want to make sure we've got oil on them again. And torque them down to the required torque. Alright, one more little green mark. And at this point I'm kind of just eyeballing it. It looks about the same as the other ones, which with a brand new crank and standard size bearings, I was kind of hoping, and it seems like this is working out just fine. So I'm going to go with that. I am definitely going to check the last one just to make sure, but I don't think I need to show you guys that. Alright, now before when we were plastigaging and checking our tolerances, we didn't have any lubrication on the inside of the bearings. When we actually assemble, of course, we want to have some assembly lube on there. And I just put a little dollop like that. And this stuff is pretty sticky. And a little dollop like that. Oh, I don't want any dirt on it. And then you just smear that in. And you smear that in. I gotta get better at looking at what I'm doing through the camera. And I'm gonna go ahead and just put a little bit on the bearing surface as well. On the crankshaft, that is. And just smear it on. Yeah, like that. And I got a little bit extra on my other finger here. And just slap it on. Make sure I got plenty there. And plenty there. And of course, one final note, we got to make sure we get a little bit of oil on the threads. I'm just using the assembly lube. I've seen guys do it with like 5W30 or 5W40, whatever they're running as the motor oil for their car, but we're just going to go ahead and use the assembly lube. If you think that's wrong, feel free to tell me. Maybe my engine's going to explode here in the next 1,000 miles when I start driving it. We'll see. Getting closer. One last thing, since I'm doing kind of this in a piecemeal hodgepodge kind of way. When you clean these things up, you want to get them nice and squeaky clean. We don't want any oil residue or anything like that, especially in this area or on the back side of the bearings. Apparently, having oil there can cause them to spin again, and if you dealt with a spun bearing already, you don't want to deal with that after you get done rebuilding it. So, get it nice and dry. Ran out of brake clean, so we're going to try using some of this SuperTech carbon air intake cleaner. Figure if it evaporates quickly enough, and you know, it's safe for carbs and air intakes, it's got to be safe for, you know, keeping this stuff clean and dry. So we're going to clean that up real good. Make sure we don't get any kind of weird slippage between the bearing surfaces and the rods. Gentlemen and ladies, we now have one brand new Subaru induction hardened crankshaft with spec'd rods on there, plastigauged, everything's facing the right way, didn't drop anything on the ground and break it, everything's smooth, nothing rattles when we pull on it. Beautiful. This one sounded like, I don't know, something, it sounded terrible. I mean, you get a little bit of play this way, but that shouldn't alarm you too much. There is a spec that I'm going to check here momentarily with feeler gauges, putting them to get the facing on between these lobes on the crankshaft and the in between the connecting rod caps. But that's what it looks like, guys.